Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation appears to be wrapping up, but the Southern District of New York is ramping up its investigations into President Trump's inner circle. Former U.S. Attorney for the district, Preet Bharara, told Face the Nation host Margaret Brennan that his old office might be a bigger threat to the president than the special counsel. Manhattan prosecutors are investigating the Trump Organization and the president's inaugural committee. Bharara has prosecuted major cases during his time with the Southern District of New York, including Osama bin Laden's son-in-law, the Times Square bomber, and infamous Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout. President Trump fired Bharara after he refused to resign as the district's U.S. attorney. And he has a new book out. It's called Doing Justice, A Prosecutor's Thoughts on Crime, Punishment, and the Rule of Law. It examines the U.S. justice system and highlights his decades of work in the legal system. And Preet Bharara is with us now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So when I knew you were coming, there was sort of a whole host of questions that I wanted to ask you. And then I dug into the book, and there's a whole other list of questions.
Well, here I am.
So let us start with what you said to Margaret Brennan. Is the Southern District, should that be more of a concern to the president than the Mueller investigation?
Yeah, I think it's more of a concern in the sense that it's independent. It's not limited by any particular issues it's allowed to look at.
Yeah.
The special counsel's investigation is necessarily limited by regulation and by the announcement made by Rod Rosenstein, the former, the current Deputy Attorney General.
Right.
Where the Southern District of New York can look at anything it wants and will, and is aggressive and doesn't care about politics and doesn't care about how powerful you are. Mm-hmm. And there's already been proof, given that they oversee the Michael Cohen case, that the Southern District has adopted the statement of Michael Cohen that he committed a campaign finance violation in coordination with and at the direction of individual one, the President of the United States. So there's already in the record in the court some evidence that the president himself has committed a crime.
Mm-hmm. Should the president be more concerned about collusion or obstruction of justice?
I don't know. Collusion, as we've come to learn over the last number of months.
Because he likes to say no collusion.
I know. Well, that's neither here nor there, really, because collusion itself is not a crime. It's a shorthand that journalists and others have used to talk about what could be through coordination with foreign power to interfere in the election or to get elected under false pretenses. But the question is whether or not there was conspiracy, whether or not there was any other kind of campaign finance violation that involved the Russian government, Russian agents, and we just don't know.
So I want to hit you with some questions about just some news, some stuff that's in the news right now. We saw this tragedy in New Zealand. You heard the president's response to that when he was asked about the rise of white nationalism around the world, and particularly in the U.S. And he said, "Oh, it's a small group of people." What was your take on his reaction?
I like to view things through evidence and the lens of what's actually true or not. And I talk about in the book repeatedly this idea that you need to base your considerations, you need to base your actions on facts and evidence. And what the president says about it being a few people, it's not the majority of people in the world, but every piece of evidence points to the fact that it's on the rise. White nationalism is on the rise. White supremacists have a new voice, and they're on the rise. And when they're on the rise, if you talk to experts who have been doing this sort of thing for a long period of time, and I think it's important for leadership to call out things as they are and to put the resources behind it. When I was a U.S. attorney, we rightly spent a lot of time, money, and resources on jihadist extremism and terrorism because it's important. We spend a pittance of that, it seems now, while white nationalism is rising and terrorist acts. Those are terrorist acts too. What happened in New Zealand was terrorism, and we should spend some amount of resources dealing with those crimes as well.
So now I'm going to sound like I'm sort of bouncing around. But I just want to get your take on certain things that we've talked about here. Paul Manafort, sentencing, was it fair or was it too light?
My view is it was too light.
Okay.
The 47 months with the 43 months on top of that by the second judge. There were two judges in two cases. I thought it was low. I did not expect or think that he would get 19 and a half or 24 years, like the guidelines seem to suggest based on the nature of the crime. But it was a serious crime done over a period of time. He should have known better. And then he missed every opportunity to make life better for himself by getting convicted at trial, trying to cooperate, lying some more, tampering with witnesses, making false statements about his confinement. That all added up to a bad situation for him. I still think at the end of the day, 7.5 years for a 69-year-old man in a white-collar case is not nothing. It's significant.
I mean, it could be technically a life sentence for a man that age.
It could be. I think it was overall low. I think the Special Prosecutor's Office is probably a little disappointed, but it's not nothing.
Representative Nadler's document requests. Where's he going with that?
they think he's going everywhere. I think he's going to at least 81 different places. I think there were 81 requests. It's interesting, you know, because the counter view is he could have taken the time to sort of slowly build up, do it more quietly. So I think there was some, you know, messaging going on there as well.
All right.
He's not a quiet investigator like, you know, the Mueller folks. He's an elected official. I think there's been a lot of pent-up frustration that there's not been any oversight by one of the branches of government, the Congress. And so Jerry Nadler, it seems to me, is both launching an investigation, telling everyone it's very broad, and also making sure that everybody knows about it.
You were fired 3 months into the president's term. Who knew that you would be probably sort of one of the first of a number of high-profile firings or pressurings to leave? I'm wondering now that you have a little bit of distance, do you have sort of a particular philosophy about being fired by the president?
No, I don't.
You know, after you came Comey, came Jeff Sessions.
Yeah, every time somebody got fired, my mom felt better and better about it. It's basically what happens. Like, every time a more famous, high-ranking person was let go, she's like, oh, it's not so bad. And, you know, in some ways, you could describe it as a badge of honor. Look, part of the reason I wrote the book is that I think we spent a lot of time being concerned about what's going on in the country, whether the rule of law is being turned on its head. You know, people say there are alternative facts. People say truth isn't truth, and I think it was important to take a step back and think about, you know, basic questions of what justice is, what fairness is, how you find facts out, how you deal with evidence, how you treat people equally before the law. And so that's what I spent a lot of time writing about. Yeah,
actually, the book is really, really interesting. It talks a lot about what drew you to this career. I'll tell you my big takeaway, and I repeated it to my daughter. Do the right thing the right way for the right reasons.
That's what was told to me when I was a young rookie prosecutor by the U.S. Attorney, Mary Jo White. I'm sure it was told to her when she was a young rookie prosecutor, and it's what we try to tell our prosecutors. Doesn't mean we're perfect. Doesn't mean we got everything right. But the aspiration was to be thoughtful and deliberative and to do the right thing in the right way for the right reasons all the time. And one of my favorite aspects of writing the book is to let the world know, this office that everyone's focusing on and thinking about because they oversee the Michael Cohen case, what makes people in that office tick. How do they go about making their decisions? And there are a lot of unsung heroes whose names people don't know and whose faces are not familiar to the public who are talked about in the book. And I think you'll come to learn about them and be pleased with what you find out.
And you also talk about how things go wrong. How can we ensure that things go right more often?
Well, you need good people. You know, better laws, people are always calling for better laws, and you can have better laws. But if the people who are involved in interpreting the law, enforcing the law, making decisions about which laws they deal with, which laws they don't deal with. If you don't have good people, then you have a terrible system, no matter how good, you know, technically written the laws are. I think you have to repeat all the time that integrity is important, that truth is important. You want to make sure that you keep an open mind. I tell all these stories as cautionary tales of cases in which people who were generally good and acting in good faith, they varied from best practices. And they forgot to fear getting it wrong. And when you add up the errors on the parts of people over time, that causes a great miscarriage of justice.
All that plus your connection to the Menendez brothers, that's my little tease for everyone. Preet Bharara, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And the book is Doing Justice. It goes on sale tomorrow.